Spiritual awakening does not ignite your purpose. It burns it to ash. What once felt like a fire in your chest, ambition, drive, goals, dissolves into a silence you cannot explain. You were told that enlightenment would make you come alive, that truth would energize you. But now, you are standing in the ruins of everything that used to move you, and it is quiet, too quiet. You are not lazy. You are not broken. What you are feeling is the fallout of seeing through the illusion. You saw behind the curtain, and now nothing feels real enough to chase. This is not failure. It is initiation. You did not lose your spark. You outgrew the flame that was not yours to begin with. The question is not how to get your motivation back. It is why it had to disappear in the first place. Thoth, the keeper of sacred truth, once said, "The silence after awakening is not a void. It's a womb." And what is forming inside you now is something no one ever taught you to want. You spent years moving through life powered by a flame that was never really yours. It was given to you, handed down like a script, and inherited like a mask. From the first gold star in school to the endless expectations of adulthood, motivation became a form of survival. You chased goals not because they fed your soul, but because they earned you praise, safety, or a seat at the table. You called it drive. You called it discipline. But underneath the hustle was fear. Fear of being left behind, of not being enough, of disappearing into irrelevance. And for a while, it worked. The engine of the ego runs loud and fast. It gets things done. It climbs ladders and collects titles and makes sure you are always busy, always producing, always proving. But when awakening hits, that engine sputters. The structures that once held your identity begin to dissolve. The goals lose their meaning. The urgency dies. And the fire, the one you thought would keep you going forever, suddenly goes out. Not in some grand explosion, but in a slow, almost imperceptible fade. What you thought was your purpose turns out to have been a performance. And when the stage collapses, so does the actor. That collapse feels like death because, in a way, it is. The ego's narrative, the story of who you thought you were, what you were supposed to want, and how you measured your worth, begins to unravel. And as it does, so does your motivation, not because you have failed, but because the fuel source was false. You cannot keep chasing goals once you see they were invented by a part of you that no longer exists. This is where many seekers panic. The mind screams, "I'm losing myself." But Thoth would say, "You're not losing yourself. You're shedding what was never truly you." The loss of motivation is not a regression. It is a resistance to going back to a version of life that was always misaligned. In the silence that follows, something deeper is trying to emerge, but it cannot coexist with the noise of your old identity. The sacred pause you are in is not apathy. It is alchemy. You are not done. You are dissolving. And yet, here is what they will not say on the surface. This part of the journey is not glamorous. It will not trend. There are no shortcuts or affirmations to bypass it. It is not the kind of awakening that makes you feel powerful. It is the kind that humbles you completely. The kind where all you can do is sit in the ash of your former fire and wait for something real to return. The truth is, this stillness you are in is not the end. It is a reset, a return to your origin. The ego ran on adrenaline and applause, but the soul moves differently. It does not rush. It does not grasp. It waits. It listens. It calls. And in that waiting, it starts to rewire you, not toward ambition, but toward alignment. You begin to realize that what is coming next will not be about proving anything. It will be about living in integrity with something ancient within you, a truth that does not need to shout to be heard. No one tells you that after the awakening comes the void. You expected light, you expected clarity, you expected to finally know what to do with your life. But instead, you wake up into a silence, the kind of silence that does not feel peaceful. It feels haunting. Where once there was drive, now there is nothing but stillness. You can feel your old self crumbling, but there is nothing replacing it yet. You are not who you were, but you are not sure who you are becoming either. You are floating in between stories, and the space in between feels like a loss you cannot name. This is the part no one glamorizes, the part that does not look like enlightenment, does not feel like bliss, and does not offer answers. It is the aftershock, the moment after the veil lifts, and the world feels suddenly too quiet, too constructed, and too hollow to take seriously anymore. You see the roles people play, and wonder how you ever played them too. You watch people chase things you used to want, money, praise, ambition, and instead of envy, you feel nothing. Not detachment, but something far stranger, like watching actors on a stage you no longer belong to. And then the questions start to echo. What am I doing? What matters now? Why does everything feel so meaningless when I thought I had just found the truth? This is the paradox. You expected awakening to set you on fire, but instead it extinguished everything. You thought knowing would lead to doing, but it leads first to undoing. Thoth calls this the sacred silence. Not an emptiness, but a womb, a space that looks barren from the outside but is full of unseen transformation. The mind will panic here. It has been conditioned to interpret stillness as danger. You have been trained to equate movement with worth. No wonder this pause feels like a failure. But this is not a failure. This is the dismantling of the false architecture. You cannot rebuild until the old foundation is cleared. And that clearing, silent, painful, and invisible, is the real work. You may look the same on the outside. You still wear your clothes, speak to people, and show up in the world. But inside, you are in a free fall, and no one around you may even notice. That is part of what makes this so disorienting. You are undergoing a spiritual death in a culture that has no language for it, no rituals, no guidance, just productivity metrics and self-help slogans that tell you to get back on track. But there is no track anymore. And that is the point. In this in-between space, time stretches. You begin to question everything, not from fear, but from fatigue. You have seen too much to go back and not enough to go forward. You are in the waiting room of your next becoming, and it is sacred, even if it feels unbearable. Thoth reminds us that what you are experiencing is not apathy. It is an absence. The absence of a false motivation, a false purpose, and a false identity. The system you used to run on is offline. You are not lazy. You are in transition. It is here, in this void, that your senses begin to change. What once excited you now feels loud. What once motivated you now feels hollow. You are not interested in the chase anymore. You are not compelled by performance. You crave something quieter, something real, but you do not know what it is yet, and that is okay. The void is not asking you to figure it out. It is asking you to stop looking for answers in the places that broke you. Stay here. Breathe here. Let yourself grieve the parts of you that no longer fit. You are not being punished. You are being purified. The silence is not mocking you. It is holding you. You have not lost your way. You have simply stepped off the map. And soon, something will begin to stir in that darkness. Not a command, not a vision board, but a pulse. And that pulse will not demand, it will invite. When it does, you will know the difference. You were taught that ambition was holy, that the ones who woke up the earliest, worked the hardest, and sacrificed the most were the ones who deserved to succeed. You learned to equate exhaustion with dedication and burnout with bravery. Somewhere along the way, stillness became suspect. Rest looked like laziness. Slowness was a weakness. And any moment not filled with progress was a moment wasted. You did not just inherit this mindset, you absorbed it. It became part of your reflexes, the invisible metrics by which you judged your own worth. Are you producing? Are you improving? Are you doing enough? Now, after your awakening, those metrics begin to dissolve. You feel no urgency, no spark, no clear goal, and a deeper fear creeps in. Not that something is wrong with the world, but that something is wrong with you. If the motivation is gone, you assume you are broken, that you have failed your own awakening. But this is where the deception runs deep. The drive you once had was not born from your soul. It was programmed into your psyche, a feedback loop built by systems that need you to strive, need you to perform, and need you to forget what it means to simply be. Thoth teaches that what we call ambition is often the echo of unhealed fear. The drive to achieve is, for many, a compensation for the terror of stillness. To stop is to feel. To slow down is to hear the silence. And in that silence lies everything society teaches us to avoid: grief, emptiness, and existential unease. So instead, we stay busy, constantly chasing something in the hope that it will drown out the quiet ache we never learned to face. But awakening brings that ache to the surface. It strips away the noise, the roles, the scripts, and suddenly you are standing in a silence you cannot outsource, medicate, or outrun. In that silence, drive begins to look strange. Not noble, not empowering, just noisy. You begin to see that much of what you once called purpose was actually pressure, an internalized performance. Thoth calls this the sacred reversal, enantiodromia. When something taken to its extreme becomes its opposite, drive becomes inertia. Hustle becomes stillness. The fire burns out, not from failure, but from overuse, from futility. This reversal is not a malfunction, it is a recalibration. The soul cannot speak at the same volume as the ego. It does not shout, it hums. It moves differently, not through deadlines and dopamine hits, but through resonance. When you are in alignment, the soul does not need motivation, it needs meaning. And meaning, unlike achievement, does not always come with applause. Often it comes in whispers, in quiet acts that go unseen, in moments that feel small but ring true. So, if you have lost your drive, ask yourself, what was driving you before? Was it love or fear, alignment or performance, truth or approval? Do not rush to replace the old fire. Do not run to light a new one. Let the ashes settle. Let the dust clear. Because underneath that burned-out engine is something waiting to emerge, not as a sprint, but as a steady, sacred movement. You will feel compelled to get back on track. You will crave your old urgency, mistaking it for energy. But Thoth reminds us that the old track was a treadmill, and the urgency was an addiction. What comes next is not about doing more. It is about doing differently, from a place of stillness, from a place of truth. There is a moment just after the unraveling begins when the world does not look quite real anymore. You walk through familiar places and speak familiar words, but none of it fits, like wearing someone else's clothes or watching yourself from a distance. It is subtle at first, a disconnection, a weightlessness, but then it deepens. You no longer recognize your own desires. The things that used to pull you forward now leave you unmoved, and yet nothing new has arrived to take their place. That is when the descent begins, not into chaos, but into the quiet, not into madness, but into the soul. This is the space Thoth calls the holy dark, a descent not into failure, but into the underworld of the psyche, where the ego unravels and nothing familiar survives. And it must be this way. You cannot carry the old scaffolding into the new foundation. The persona, the carefully crafted identity you wore for the world, has to die before the self can rise. But death, even symbolic, rarely feels like freedom. It feels like collapse. This is not depression in the clinical sense, though it may echo its symptoms. This is something older, something sacred. Depression numbs and detaches. This descent awakens something raw. You are not checked out. You are too aware, painfully aware. Aware of how much of your life was built on avoidance. Aware of the scripts you performed to be accepted. Aware of the dreams you inherited, not chose. And now, stripped of all distraction, you are face to face with what is underneath it all. Silence. And not the kind that soothes, but the kind that confronts. Our culture has no patience for this stage. It medicates it, pathologizes it, and labels it as dysfunction. But Thoth would say this descent is not a breakdown. It is an initiation, a dismantling of what was never real so that what is real can begin to form. The ego collapses loudly. The soul emerges quietly. You will not find it by forcing clarity. You will find it by surrendering to not knowing. This is where time slows. Days blend. Energy comes in waves or not at all. Your old self, the one that could push through, hustle harder, and grind without stopping, that self is gone. And in its absence, you feel exposed, vulnerable, like a seed in the soil, broken open before its roots have taken hold. You want to grow, you want direction, but nothing responds. That is the test. Can you stay in the soil long enough to trust that growth is happening, even when you see no proof? The descent into the soul is not poetic when you are in it. It is gritty, quiet, and terrifying. It strips you of all external validation, and in that nakedness, it forces you to ask, who am I, without the performance, without the praise, without the purpose? And the only answer that comes is a whisper. Wait. Wait, not as in passive, but as in a sacred stillness, a stillness as a space where truth begins to reassemble itself. In this descent, you do not find answers. You become the question. Every layer that falls away reveals another lie you once lived. Every silence hides a doorway. And yet, no map will guide you through this. Only trust. Not in outcomes, but in the process. Thoth teaches that this stage is not a punishment for awakening. It is the price of becoming whole. You cannot bypass it. You cannot fast forward through it. You can only descend. And the deeper you go, the more space you create for something true to rise. This is the part where nothing happens. Or at least, that is how it feels. No great revelations, no divine downloads, just silence. Long stretches of quiet, uncertainty, and stillness that seem to stretch on without end. After the descent into the soul, after the collapse of your old identity, there is no immediate resurrection, no swift rise from the ashes. There is only this, the pause. And it is maddening because you have been trained to associate value with motion, progress, and evidence. But now you are living in the chrysalis, and the chrysalis does not perform. Everything in you may scream to escape it, to go back to doing, planning, achieving, anything to outrun this inertia. But the soul works on a different clock, one not bound by urgency or outcome. It demands incubation, not acceleration. You are not malfunctioning. You are not failing. You are transforming in a way that is invisible on the surface, but is monumental beneath it. Thoth reminds us that the caterpillar does not become a butterfly by adding wings. It dissolves. It becomes unrecognizable before it becomes whole. In the chrysalis, it is no longer what it was and not yet what it will be. It is goo, formless and undefined. That is you right now, and that is why everything feels so strange, so empty, so out of sync. You have shed the old structure, but the new form has not yet emerged. You are becoming, even as you feel like you are disappearing. This space is sacred, but it does not feel safe because you have no script to follow here, no model to emulate. The world outside continues to spin with goals, deadlines, and highlight reels, while you are asked to wait, to stay soft, to stay silent, and to stay surrendered. And that is a kind of courage few will ever understand. The kind of courage that does not look like a battle, but like stillness. Not because you are avoiding the world, but because you are learning to meet it from a place that is real. You may feel pressure to explain yourself, to justify the season to others, to make it seem like you are still productive, still improving, but the soul does not justify itself. It does not compete for validation. It knows that this quiet season is not a pause in your life. It is the foundation of your real one. You are not behind, you are beneath. Beneath the surface, beneath the noise, beneath the illusion, and down here, something ancient is rooting itself within you. It will not announce itself with clarity or confidence. It will not come in the language of goals or plans. It will come as a pull, a quiet knowing, a subtle but steady hum in your chest that says, not this, but something else. And when it comes, it will not ask you to return to who you were. It will invite you to rise as someone you have never been, but not yet. The wait is not over. You cannot rush what must unfold in darkness. You cannot force what must grow slowly. Trust is the only map here. Not blind faith, but a deeper trust, the kind that comes from recognizing that life is not punishing you. It is preparing you, that nothing is missing, that your soul is still speaking, even if it is only in silence. Thoth teaches that real transformation is not loud. It is not theatrical, and it is not designed for display. It happens in the unseen, the undefined, the deeply personal spaces where no one is watching and no one is clapping. So if you are here, suspended in the in-between, feeling unmotivated, uninspired, and unclear, know this. You are exactly where you need to be. You are not stuck, you are cocooned. When the shift begins, it does not come with fireworks. It does not come with clarity, a plan, or a rush of energy that tells you you are finally back. It arrives like a whisper, a soft inner tug, a faint pulse that does not push but gently pulls. After so much silence, it is easy to miss it. You have grown used to the stillness. You have stopped looking for direction because direction stopped arriving in the ways it used to. But now, something stirs, not loud, not obvious, but undeniable. You might not even recognize it as movement at first. It does not feel like motivation. It does not feel like drive. It feels like resonance, like a truth humming just beneath the surface, asking not for speed, but for sincerity. There is no urgency in it, no pressure to make up for lost time, just a quiet knowing that it is time to begin again, but this time from somewhere entirely different. Thoth calls this the sacred return. Not a return to the old, but a return to the self, the you that was buried beneath years of conditioning, roles, and expectations. That self does not need a mission statement. It does not need to be validated or applauded. It only needs to be honored. And you honor it not by forcing clarity, but by following that subtle inner pull toward the things that feel real, simple, and alive. This new movement will not feel like what you knew before. It will not be fueled by fear or the desire to prove yourself. You will not be chasing success or checking boxes. You will be responding, listening, and following threads of energy that make no sense to the ego, but feel completely right to your soul. And this is where many people get confused, because from the outside, it looks like you are doing less. You may even look like you have stepped away from the world. But inside, everything is beginning again. You are not working harder. You are working truer. You are not speaking louder. You are speaking cleaner. You are not trying to be someone. You are allowing yourself to simply be. And in that being, creation returns not as a demand, but as a desire, a natural urge to express what you now know in your bones, not just in your mind. To move, because it would feel like a betrayal not to. To act, not because you are told to, but because something inside is finally ready. This is the real return of motivation, not the borrowed performative kind, but the soul-born kind. It is quiet, it is rooted, and it does not burn out because it is not trying to be seen. It is not a show, it is not a comeback. It is a continuation of something ancient that has been waiting for space within you. You may find yourself creating again, writing, speaking, building, helping, not because you must, but because you cannot not. The self does not strive, it flows. And when you act from this place, your energy no longer leaks, it replenishes. You are not drained by what you do, you are nourished by it. You are not chasing alignment, you are becoming it. Rebirth, as Thoth reminds us, is not a blaze. It is a candle lit in the dark. It is subtle, sacred, and entirely sovereign. It will not demand your attention, it will wait for your consent. And when you offer it, everything begins to move again, not from pressure, but from peace. The old fire was dramatic. It flared when you were praised, surged when you felt threatened, and dimmed when you were not validated. It was a fire of reaction, a flame that fed on recognition, ambition, and anxiety. It burned fast, and it burned you out. You mistook it for purpose because it kept you moving, but in hindsight, it was unstable, flickering with every gust of approval or disappointment. When your awakening took that fire from you, it felt like death. But what you are beginning to realize now is that it made space for a flame that cannot be extinguished because it does not come from the world. It comes from within. This new fire is quieter. It does not rise with applause or shrink under pressure. It lives deeper, beyond your thoughts, beyond your mood, beyond the games of self-worth. It does not ask, what do I need to do to be enough? It asks, what is real me now? And the answer is not loud. It is steady. It is calm. It does not shout to be noticed because it does not need to be. It simply burns, gently, constantly, and unapologetically. This is the beginning of living from essence instead of from effort. You are no longer performing to be seen. You are expressing because you have remembered who you are. That remembrance does not always bring clarity in the form of goals or 5-year plans. Sometimes it just changes how you show up, the way you speak, the way you listen, the way you exist in the world. Even when no one is watching, there is no longer a need to hustle for meaning. You do not need to find your purpose like it is some hidden object buried beneath years of failure. You begin to understand that purpose is not something you chase. It is something you become. And it unfolds naturally when you live from that steady internal flame. Thoth teaches that true power is not loud or forceful. It is an unshakable presence, a rootedness that cannot be touched by trends or metrics or external validation, a devotion to what is true, even when it makes no sense to anyone else. You may start doing things that seem small, reading differently, creating without an audience, walking without a destination, speaking from a place of stillness. These are not symptoms of apathy. They are signs of a return to the self, a return to rhythm, a return to the inner intelligence that never needed fixing, only the space to breathe. And yes, people might not understand this new version of you. They may miss your drive, your fire, your ambition, but that is only because they have not seen what comes after the awakening. The version of you that moves from wholeness, not hunger, that builds, not to prove, but to honor, that rests not because it is earned, but because it is natural. You are no longer living a life of reaction. You are living a life of resonance, and that resonance will guide you toward what is truly yours. It will not always be obvious, and it will not always be easy, but it will always feel aligned. It will always feel like home. Thoth reminds us that the flame of the soul is not for show. It is for truth. It is not meant to light a stage. It is meant to light the path within. You are no longer trying to impress the world. You are listening to the world inside of you, and in that shift, everything begins to change. Something subtle happens when you begin living from the self. Life no longer feels like a stage you must perform on or a ladder you are supposed to climb. It starts to feel like a rhythm, an unfolding, not a test, not a task, just a deepening movement, unique to you, steady and strange. You stop asking, "What should I be doing?" and start listening for what feels quietly true. The self does not rush. It does not demand. It does not shout over the noise of the world. It waits. And when you finally give it space, it speaks, not in commands, but in pulses, gentle pulls, and sacred nudges. The kind of inner knowing you cannot explain, but you also cannot ignore. You may find your days changing, not in ways that look dramatic, but in ways that feel honest. You are not waking up with anxiety anymore. You are not forcing plans that no longer resonate. You are not saying yes to things that stretch you thin. Your life begins to reorient, not around productivity, but around presence, around what feels alive, around what resonates in your chest instead of what makes sense on paper. This is not about becoming someone new. This is about finally allowing who you have always been to lead. It is not easy because the world will still try to pull you back into the old pace, into the noise, the urgency, the pressure to prove. But something in you has changed. You can feel when you are out of alignment now, not in theory, but in your body, in your nervous system, in your breath. Misalignment feels like static. Resonance feels like peace, and slowly, you start choosing peace more often, not as an escape, but as a compass. Thoth teaches that the self is not found through striving, but through a stripping away. It does not appear as a goal achieved, but as a presence remembered. It was always there, underneath the layers of ego, conditioning, and cultural noise. And now, in the quiet that has followed your awakening, it has the space to breathe, the space to guide, the space to pulse through your life like a current, drawing you not toward achievement, but toward authenticity. You are not interested in chasing anymore. You are interested in cultivating, in building slowly, in doing things that take root. You understand that real creation does not come from adrenaline, it comes from alignment. And alignment is not glamorous. It does not always look like success, but it feels like integrity. It feels like home. This is where the return begins, not to the old world, but to a deeper kind of participation, one where you no longer ask for permission to be who you are, one where your inner authority speaks louder than the world's expectations. You are not trying to fit in anymore. You are finally letting life fit around what is real in you. And in that shift, the self does not just awaken, it begins to lead. There comes a point in the journey when the stillness you once feared becomes the very thing that anchors you. It no longer feels like waiting. It feels like being. Not passive, not aimless, but rooted, present, and honest. The fire that once drove you was frantic and erratic, built on scarcity and urgency. But what you carry now is different. It does not flare. It glows, constant, humble, and unshakable. And you realize something you never could have seen before. The stillness was never a void. It was the threshold of your real life beginning. You no longer move because you are trying to catch up. You move because something within you is in motion, and you are finally in sync with it. This movement is not driven by guilt or timelines or some invisible scoreboard. It is pulled by meaning. And meaning, you have discovered, does not live in the future. It lives in how you show up now, in the quality of your attention, in the sincerity of your yes, in the courage of your no. You have stopped chasing the version of yourself you were told to become. You have stopped asking what the world needs from you and started asking what truth needs to come through you. The difference is subtle, but everything changes when you live from that place. The world may still demand your hustle, your output, your participation in the race, but you have stepped off the track, not in defiance, but in devotion. You are not trying to escape life. You are trying to meet it with your soul intact. You begin to feel a deeper intelligence moving through your choices. Not rational, not linear, but unmistakable. You walk away from things that no longer match your frequency, even if they once thrilled you. You stop justifying your need for space, for silence, for softness. You begin to live as if your inner world matters more than the world's reaction to it. And in doing so, something extraordinary happens. You feel free. Not a loud, revolutionary, billboard-style freedom, but a quiet, sovereign, embodied freedom, the kind that does not need to declare itself to be real, the kind that allows you to live lightly, to create slowly, to speak gently. You do not need to convince anyone. You do not need to be understood. The truth you carry now does not need defending. It just needs living. And that is the paradox of awakening. You thought it would make you more. Instead, it made you less, but only less of what was never really you. What remains is the part of you that cannot be shaken, cannot be sold, cannot be lost. It is steady, sacred, and profoundly yours. And from this place, motivation becomes irrelevant. What replaces it is resonance, alignment, and integrity. Not as lofty ideals, but as the invisible architecture of your every action. Your life is no longer a performance. It is a prayer, a quiet offering to something deeper than desire. The soul does not hustle, it harmonizes. And now, so do you. If you have reached this point and still think your motivation is missing, look again. What you have lost is the noise. What you have gained is a signal. The one you were always meant to follow. Not because it is loud, but because it is true. This knowledge was meant for real seekers. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting, "I understood it."